Hello guys, welcome to Online Web Tutor presented by Profotech Solutions team. I am Sanjay. We are learning CodeIgniter Framework Beginners tutorial and this is our part number 22. Inside this video session guys, we will discuss about session library in CodeIgniter Framework. And also guys, if you are a beginner to the channel, please don't forget to subscribe and keep watching our previous video sessions to get the clear concept about CodeIgniter Framework tutorial. So basically guys, so far up to part number 21, we have discussed several things in our CodeIgniter framework. So if we back to browser, now inside this channel, we can find about the several videos related with our CodeIgniter framework. Inside this all these 21 videos, we have covered about the concept of query builder, something called form helper, some concepts of form validations, many more things we have covered. So now inside this video, we are going to use a library. This is the library actually provided by the CodeIgniter framework. So what basically it is, so if we back to next tab, this is a simple statement. Basically instead of this PHP framework CodeIgniter, we have a session concept. Actually we have read in our PHP. What is basically session is, the session class permits you maintain a user's state and track their activity while they browse your site. As we have seen in our PHP that we have to use the session to track the user's state, to save the user's value. For example, suppose we are going to make an application. Inside that application, we want to save some values related with our logged in user. So in those conditions, actually we have used about the session concept. And the concept was, you already know. So if I open a new tab, here is something called PHP functions. What was those functions? Something we have session start. Firstly, if we want to use session, so this is the function we need to use called session start. After that, we are going to access called the global variable session. Inside this global variable session, we are going to set some value. So this is something called name as a key, and this is the value that we have set. So if I write, let's say online web tutor, this is the value we have actually saved inside this key, and this is key inside this session variable. Also, if you want to set more than one values, so if I copy that, pasting it here, and let's say that this is called email. So if I writing it here, so let's abcd@gmail.com. So this is one of the session variable and this is another one. So if we want to, let's say that print, if we want to access those values, so how can we access that? Simply write echo, and this is our session. Let's say that we are going to retrieve the email value. So only we need to write the key name finally, and this is the value. So basically we can understand that session is nothing. Session is a storage area basically used to store the values until and unless we destroy those values. So let's say that we are going to print all these values. So how can we print? Simply we need to use called print r, and let's say that session as a global. Now by writing this statement, we are going to fetch all the details what we have stored inside all the session variables. And finally, if we want to destroy all those values, so how can we destroy that? So something session, and we have the function called destroy. This should destroy all the values what we have stored inside this global variable called session. Now if we want to set, or let's say destroy only a single value, so how can we destroy that? We have a PHP function called unset. Inside this PHP function, simply we need to pass this value. So let's say that. So by writing this statement, we have simply destroyed only the name value. Email actually exists. So basically guys, these are the concepts that we have already studied in our PHP. Now inside PHP framework, actually in CodeIgniter, how can we initialize session, how can we store values, how can we use to print those values, and also how can we destroy all these things we are going to study inside this video. So back to editor. Now inside this application, firstly we are going to create a controller. So back to controllers folder, let's say that new file, and we are going to make call my, let's say session. So let's say my session dot php, and I'm going to make capital M here. So pressing enter, inside this controller file, let's say that php class, and the class that we have made something called my session. It extends something called CI and controller. This is the parent controller. Actually we are going to inherit that. Now inside this, firstly if we want to use session, then we need to load a library, and basically session is a library in CodeIgniter framework. This is built-in library package. So how can we load that package? So firstly we need to make a constructor. So public function, we have a function called construct. Inside this construct function we have to declare a library. So this load something library as a method, and inside this library we need to write the session. This is called the session library. By writing that, now we are going to access the library package. Now if I'm going to make a function which basically stores some values inside that session. So let's say public function add, let's say session. Inside this add session method we are going to store some values. So let's say this session. Basically by using this library, by loading this library, if I go to our tab and let's say that this load library, and inside this library let's say session, by loading this package basically we have access something called this session. Now this session provides several methods. By using that we can store, we can retrieve, and we can destroy all the values. So back to editor, let's say that we are going to store some values. So this session we have method called set underscore, let's say user data. Inside that we need to first provide the key name, what we have seen inside this PHP concept. This is the key. So in the same way we have to provide the key here, and finally the value. So let's say name equal to online Web Tutor. Also if you want to store more than one value, so again I'm going to copy, pasting it here. Let's say email abcd@gmail.com. So by writing this add session method, inside that session method we have stored two values inside our session. So let's say that if I go to config folder, open up called routes.php file. Inside this file firstly I'm going to make a route. So let's say that route, let's add hyphen, let's say session. This route basically called my session. This is the controller, and inside that controller we have a method something called add underscore session. So if I copy that and pasting it here, so if I save this file, again if I save this file, back to our browser, go to our next tab, if I back to URL and let's say that index.php and add hyphen session, what we have made inside our routes.php file. Okay, this is the route. So if I go again here, reload this page, now as we have some error, and if I again go to route, pressing enter, this is error something called parse and syntax error we have. So back to editor, now semicolon we have actually error that. So if I go here again, reload this page, now again we have some more errors, and this is error something called undefined property load. So back to our editor, go here, and before loading this library package actually we forgot to add something called parent, and this is the constructor method. Basically we need to call before this library about our parent constructor. This is the constructor coming from this ci underscore controller. So if I save this file, go here, reload this page, now as we can see that our session has been successfully set with the two values, and the value is something called name and the email. So how can we actually get all those values from session? So let's go ahead and make a function for that. So public function, let's say get underscore session. Inside that we are going to print all those values what we have inside our session. So let's say print r, or simply let's say all session values this session. Basically we have loaded our library package session. Now inside that we have a method something called all underscore user data. This method returns all those values which we have inside our session. So let's say print r. Inside that if I copy this variable, printing it here, save this file, back here, and also we have to make a route. So copy that, pasting it here, and let's say get sessions, and this will actually basically calls get underscore session. So back to here, pasting it here, save this file, and if I copy this route name, back to browser, pasting it here, pressing enter, and as we can see that we have three values inside our session, something called name, email. This is the by default value set by our CodeIgniter library package. So successfully we have retrieved all those values what we have inside our session. Let's say that we are going to retrieve only a single value. So how can we retrieve that? Just comment this line, and let's say that only we want to retrieve about something called name. So this session something user data, this is the method, and inside this user method we have to provide the key name, something called name. So if I let's echo name, save this file, back here, reload this page, and as we can see that this is the name. This is not the single way to get the value of that name. What we have the alternative way, back to editor. If I copy this line, comment that, pasting it here. Also we can write instead of this thing only we can write name, because this is the key we have set right here. So if I save this file, back to our browser, reload this page, now as we can see that output will remain same. If I back to tab, now inside that this is the concept actually PHP provides. Now let's say that here we have two keys called name and the email. So let's say that we are going to print some values, something called echo. This is session, and we are writing let's say mobile. This is the value as we know that does not exist in our session. So before echoing that, before printing to the browser, how can we check that? In PHP we have used the concept something called if. Each set is a function to check that the value has been set inside this key or not. If it is set, we have successfully echoed that inside this if block. Else we have no value. So inside that let's echo no mobile exists. So how basically we can actually control this situation inside CodeIgniter? So back to editor, let's say that as we know that only we have name and the email. So how can we check that mobile exists or not? So only the thing we need to do, if I go here, comment this line, let's say that if we have the function called this session, inside this session we have function called has user data. Inside that only we can write the key name, something called mobile. If it exists, then it provides the value. So if I copy, pasting it here, else it will print the message something called echo mobile value does not exist. So if I save this file, back to our browser, reload this page, now as we can see that mobile value does not exist, obviously because we have no value of mobile here. If I write it something email, if I write email here, save this file, back to browser, reload this page, and now as we can see that basically the email value exists. This simply one indicates that the value we have inside our email key. So back here, if we want to print that value, only we need to write let's say email, save this file, back to browser, reload this page, and now this is our email ID. Now the next thing we need to study about how can we destroy the session value. Back to our tab, as we can see that inside PHP concept we have called session destroy, or unset is the function which basically destroy a single key. So how can we destroy in CodeIgniter? So back to editor, let's say that we have to destroy some value. So let's go ahead and make a different function for that. So public function, let's remove underscore session. Inside that method we are going to actually basically remove let's say email value. So we need to write echo, or let's say simply this session. This session has a function called unset underscore user data. inside unset underscore user data, only we need to pass the key. So let's say email. Successfully we have destroyed that, and if I go ahead and print that value, so let's say print this session all underscore user data. So if I save this file, go to routes.php, copy this route, pasting it here, and let's say that remove session, and it will call a method something remove underscore session. So copy that method name, pasting it here, save this file, copy this route, go to browser, and let's say that we are going to remove our email value. So pressing enter. Now as we can see that inside all the user data, email does not exist, only we have the name and the default value. Also, if we want to remove this name pair, so back to editor, back to controller, and just copy this line, and let's say name value. So if I again back to browser, reload this page, successfully we have removed the name key. So basically guys, inside this video session, what we have learned so far, we have seen about how can we load our library package, something called session. Also we have seen about how can we store values inside session. Also we have seen about how can we print all those values, how can we check about the session data, and also how can we destroy all the values what we actually session contains. The last point we need to discuss inside this video is that we can store an array value inside our session as well. Basically, if I back to tab, inside PHP, if I want to store more than one values inside this session, so we have two ways. Either we can specify writing these keys values, or we can just simply write array. Inside this array format, we can write as key, its value. Also we can write key here, also its value. This is something called value 1, this is something called value 2, and also we have the key 1 and the key 2. So if I make comment this line, we need to store these two values inside a single line. So we need to specify only name, something called email, and the respective values what we have here. So if I back to editor, let's say that we are going to store two values. As we know that we have destroyed this name and email here. So if I again let's say this session, let's say set user data, inside that we are going to store our array values. Inside that array, let's say name, something let's say Sanjay, and the email let's say something called sanjay@gmail.com. So we have stored two values, means inside array we have stored two keys, and we have set successfully inside this session. So if I save this file, back to browser, reload this page, now as we can see that we have name and the email, which basically we have set by using array parameters inside this set underscore user data method. So these are the things guys we need to keep in our mind while actually using session package library inside CodeIgniter framework. So inside this video, if you have any doubt, then please drop your comment. I will give my reply as soon as possible. So for this video session guys, thank you for watching and have a great day.